Document. Part 1. The stars above Montana were unusually bright that night. The vast expanse of the sky stretched endlessly, dotted with twinkling lights that seemed to whisper secrets of the universe. Beneath this celestial canopy, a streak of fire tore through the atmosphere, leaving behind a trail of smoke and glowing embers. It was not a shooting star, nor was it a meteorite. It was something far more extraordinary. Princess Lyra of the Zarathian Empire gripped the controls of her small spacecraft as alarms blared around her. Her usually calm demeanor was replaced by urgency as she tried to stabilize the ship. A malfunction in the navigation system had sent her careening off course during what was supposed to be a routine diplomatic mission. Now, instead of observing distant civilizations from the safety of her cruiser, she found herself hurtling toward an unfamiliar planet. Earth. The ship shook violently as it entered the atmosphere, its protective shields barely holding together against the intense heat. Lyra clenched her teeth, her hands moving swiftly over the console in an attempt to regain control. But the damage was too severe. With a final jolt, the craft slammed into the ground, skidding across the rugged terrain before coming to a halt, in a cloud of dust and debris. For a moment, there was silence. Lyra sat motionless, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she processed what had just happened. She glanced at the cracked viewport, where the first rays of sunlight filtered through the settling dust. Beyond the wreckage, she could see rolling hills covered in tall grass, interrupted only by the occasional cluster of trees. It was a landscape unlike anything she had ever seen on her home planet. Taking a deep breath, Lyra unbuckled herself from the pilot's seat and stepped out of the battered vessel. The air smelled strange, fresh yet tinged with the scent of earth and vegetation. She looked around, her sharp eyes scanning for any signs of life. Though the area appeared deserted, she knew better than to let her guard down. Earth might have been considered primitive by Zarathian standards, but appearances could be deceiving. As Lyra examined the exterior of her ship, she noticed several critical systems were damaged beyond immediate repair. Her communicator was partially functional, emitting faint static when she activated it, but it lacked the range needed to contact her empire. Without assistance, she would remain stranded until someone, or something, found her. It didn't take long for fate to intervene. In the distance, the sound of an engine grew louder, accompanied by the crunch of tires on gravel. Lyra turned her head sharply, spotting a dusty pickup truck winding its way along a narrow dirt road. At the wheel was a man in his early 30s, wearing a faded baseball cap and a grease-stained jacket. His name was Alex Carter, though Lyra wouldn't learn that until later. Alex slowed down as he approached the crash site, his brow furrowing in confusion. He had lived in this part of Montana all his life, and had never seen anything like the strange object embedded in the ground. Curiosity outweighed caution as he parked the truck and climbed out, walking cautiously toward the scene. "Hey, you, okay?" Alex called out, his voice carrying across the open field. Lyra froze, unsure how to respond. Humans were not known for their hospitality toward outsiders. At least that was what her studies had suggested. Still, she couldn't afford to alienate a potential ally. Slowly, she raised her hands in a gesture of peace and replied in halting English, "I am uninjured." Alex blinked in surprise. The woman standing before him looked human enough, albeit with striking features. Piercing blue eyes, high cheekbones, and skin that seemed to shimmer faintly under the sunlight. Yet there was something undeniably otherworldly about her presence. Her clothing, a sleek metallic suit that hugged her frame, was unlike anything he had ever seen. "Well," Alex said after a pause, scratching the back of his neck, "you sure don't look like you're from around here. What exactly are you doing out in the middle of nowhere?" Lyra hesitated, weighing her options. She decided honesty, or at least a partial version of it, might work in her favor. "My vessel malfunctioned," she explained, gesturing toward the wreckage. "I require assistance to repair it." Alex crossed his arms, studying her carefully. Despite her unusual appearance, there was a sincerity in her tone that made him want to believe her. And besides, who else would stumble upon a crashed spaceship in the middle of nowhere? This kind of thing only happened in movies. Or so he thought. "All right," he finally said, nodding. "I can help you fix whatever's broken, but I gotta warn you I'm no NASA engineer, just a mechanic who fixes cars for a living." Lyra tilted her head, unfamiliar with the term NASA but understanding the gist of his statement. "Your skills will suffice," she assured him, though privately, she wondered if they truly would. Time was of the essence and she couldn't afford delays. Over the next few hours, Alex worked tirelessly alongside Lyra, using tools from his truck to salvage parts from her ship. They communicated awkwardly at first, with Lyra struggling to grasp colloquial expressions and idioms. But as the day wore on, a tentative rapport began to form between them. Alex found himself intrigued by her intelligence and determination, while Lyra admired his resourcefulness and willingness to help, despite the bizarre circumstances. By sunset, they had managed to restore basic functionality to her communication device, though it still lacked the power needed to transmit signals over interstellar distances. Exhausted but satisfied with their progress, Alex leaned back against the truck, wiping sweat from his forehead. "So," he began casually, "you gonna tell me where you're really from? Because unless there's some secret government program, I don't know about. Spaceships aren't exactly standard issue around here." Lyra met his gaze, debating how much to reveal. Trust was a fragile thing, especially between two individuals separated by light years of culture and experience. Finally, she chose her words carefully. "I am a traveler," she said simply, "from a place very different from yours. My intentions are peaceful, but my journey has been unexpected." Alex chuckled softly, shaking his head in disbelief. "Peaceful, huh? Well, I guess we'll see about that. For now, though, you're stuck with me. Name's Alex, by the way." A faint smile tugged at the corners of Lyra's lips. "I am Lyra," she replied, offering her hand in a gesture of friendship. Alex took it, his grip firm but gentle. As darkness fell over the plains, the two sat beside the wreckage, sharing stories under the starlit sky. Alex spoke of his life in Montana, of growing up in a small town and learning the trade of mechanics from his late father. Lyra listened intently, fascinated by the simplicity of his existence compared to the rigid hierarchy of her own world. She shared glimpses of her upbringing, describing the opulent palaces and advanced technology of the Zorathian Empire. She omitted details about her royal status, fearing it might complicate matters. Instead, she focused on the lessons she had learned, to value efficiency, discipline, and order above all else. Despite their differences, a mutual respect blossomed between them. Alex marveled at Lyra's intellect and adaptability, while Lyra found herself drawn to his warmth and humor. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of connection that transcended duty and obligation. As the night deepened, Lyra gazed up at the stars, her thoughts drifting to the challenges ahead. She knew repairing her ship was only the beginning. Returning to her empire would mean facing questions she wasn't ready to answer, and making choices that could alter the course of her destiny. But for now, surrounded by the quiet beauty of Earth and the unexpected kindness of a stranger, she allowed herself a rare moment of peace. Little did she know, this encounter would set into motion events that would change not only her life, but the fate of two worlds. The next morning brought with it the crisp bite of Montana's autumn air. Lyra awoke to the sound of birds chirping and the distant hum of Alex's truck engine. She had spent the night inside the cab, wrapped in a blanket Alex had thoughtfully provided. It wasn't the most comfortable arrangement, but it was far better than anything she might have expected after crash landing on an alien planet. As she stepped out of the truck, stretching her limbs, she noticed Alex already hard at work. He was crouched beside her ship, tinkering with wires and circuits he didn't fully understand but seemed determined to fix anyway. His hands moved with practiced ease, though his brow was furrowed in concentration. Lyra watched him quietly for a moment, marveling at how humans could adapt so readily to unfamiliar situations. "You're awake," Alex said without looking up, sensing her presence. "I figured you'd want to get started early." Lyra nodded, stepping closer to inspect his progress. "Your efforts are commendable," she said, her tone formal yet warm, "though I must admit your methods are unconventional." Alex chuckled, finally glancing up at her. Yeah, well, when you spend half your life fixing busted-up trucks, you learn to make do with what you've got. Besides, this isn't exactly my first rodeo. Lyra raised an eyebrow, unfamiliar with the phrase. Rodeo? It's just an expression, Alex explained with a grin. Means I've dealt with tough situations before. Don't worry about it. She nodded slowly, storing the phrase away for future reference. Humans were full of such peculiar sayings, colorful and confusing but oddly endearing. Together they resumed their work on the ship. Lyra guided Alex through the more technical aspects, explaining how each component functioned while he translated her instructions into practical solutions. Their collaboration was a blend of alien precision and human ingenuity, and despite the complexity of the task, they made steady progress. By midday, the repairs were nearly complete. The communication device now emitted a steady hum, signaling that it was operational, at least partially. While it still lacked the power needed for long-distance transmission, it was enough to scan nearby frequencies. As Lyra activated the scanner, a burst of static filled the air, followed by faint voices speaking in rapid, clipped tones. What is that? Alex asked, leaning closer to listen. It appears to be a local broadcast, Lyra replied, adjusting the frequency. The voices grew clearer, revealing snippets of conversation about military exercises taking place nearby. Intrigued, Lyra continued to tune the device until she found a live feed detailing troop movements and strategic maneuvers. Alex frowned as he pieced together the context. That's Fort Monroe, he said, pointing toward the horizon. It's a military base about 20 miles from here. They're probably running drills or something. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly as she absorbed the information. The concept of organized warfare fascinated her, not because of its violence but because of the intricate planning and coordination required. On Zorathia, battles were often swift and decisive, relying on superior technology rather than strategy. But Earth seemed to approach conflict differently, emphasizing adaptability and teamwork. We should observe this firsthand, Lyra said, suddenly turning to Alex. If we are to repair my ship further, understanding your methods of combat may prove beneficial. Alex hesitated, scratching the back of his head. I don't know, Lyra. Military bases aren't exactly tourist attractions. We could get into trouble if we're caught snooping around. I assure you I have no intention of interfering, Lyra replied earnestly, merely observing. Knowledge is a tool, not a weapon. Her words carried a weight that Alex couldn't ignore. There was something compelling about her curiosity, a genuine desire to learn rather than exploit. After a moment's deliberation, he sighed and nodded. All right, fine. But we'll have to be careful. If anyone asks, you're my cousin visiting from out of town, okay? Lyra tilted her head, considering the lie. A plausible fabrication, she agreed. Lead the way. The drive to Fort Monroe took less time than expected. As they approached the perimeter, Alex parked the truck on a hill overlooking the IKM training grounds. From their vantage point, they had a clear view of soldiers moving in formation, executing drills with precision and discipline. Lyra observed silently, her sharp eyes missing nothing. One figure in particular caught her attention, a woman in her late 30s with short dark hair and a commanding presence. She barked orders with authority, her voice carrying across the field as she directed her unit through a series of tactical exercises. Her name, Lyra learned from Alex, was Captain Rachel Monroe, a decorated officer known for her leadership skills. She's good, Alex commented, watching as Rachel coordinated a simulated ambush scenario. Really good. You can tell she's been doing this a long time. Lyra nodded absently, captivated by the scene unfolding below. She noted how the soldiers relied on trust and communication to execute their plans, seamlessly adapting to changing circumstances. It was a stark contrast to the rigid protocols enforced by Zorathian forces, where individual initiative was discouraged in favor of blind obedience. Why do they fight? Lyra asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Is it always for conquest, or do they have other motivations? Alex hesitated, unsure how to answer. Well, Sometimes it's about protecting people, he said slowly. Other times, it's about standing up for what's right. War's complicated, Lyra. Not everything's black and white. His explanation resonated deeply with her. For all its flaws, humanity seemed driven by ideals beyond mere survival. Ideals like freedom, justice, and compassion. These were concepts rarely discussed in the halls of Zarathian power, where strength and dominance reigned supreme. As the afternoon wore on, Lyra continued to analyze the training exercises, mentally cataloging every detail. She noticed patterns in the soldiers' movements, subtle cues that indicated shifts in strategy. Her mind worked tirelessly, drawing connections between their actions and the historical accounts she had studied aboard her ship. At one point, Rachel paused to address her troops, her voice rising above the din. "Remember," she said firmly, "the key to victory isn't just firepower, it's knowing when to adapt. A plan means nothing if you can't adjust to the unexpected." Lyra repeated the words softly under her breath, committing them to memory. Adaptability, an idea both simple and profound. It was a lesson she knew she would carry with her long after leaving Earth. Eventually, the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the training grounds. Realizing they had lingered too long, Alex suggested they return to the crash site before nightfall. Reluctantly, Lyra agreed, though her thoughts remained focused on the events of the day. On the drive back, Alex glanced at her occasionally, noting the distant look in her eyes. "You're thinking about what you saw down there, aren't you?" he asked. "Yes," Lyra admitted. "There is much to consider. Your species possesses qualities I had not anticipated, qualities that could inspire change." Alex smiled, faintly, though there was a hint of sadness in his expression. "Change doesn't come easy, Lyra. People resist it, even when it's for the best." "I am aware," she replied quietly. "But resistance can be overcome with perseverance." They arrived back at the wreckage just as twilight settled over the plains. As Alex gathered tools to continue working on the ship, Lyra stood apart, gazing up at the stars. Her thoughts drifted to her father, Emperor Darius, and the rigid empire she had left behind. Would he understand what she had learned here? Or would he dismiss it as weakness? For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to entertain the possibility that returning home might not mean conforming to expectations. Perhaps there was another path, one that bridged the gap between her world and Earth's. But such ambitions would require courage, patience, and allies willing to stand by her side. As the night deepened, Alex joined her by the ship, offering her a cup of coffee he had brewed using a portable thermos. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "Figured you could use something to warm you up." Lyra accepted the drink gratefully, savoring the rich aroma. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." Alex shrugged, his usual easygoing demeanor returning. "Hey, what are friends for, right?" Friends. The word struck a chord within Lyra, filling her with a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. Though their worlds were separated by light years, the bond they had formed felt real and precious. Unbeknownst to them, however, their peaceful interlude was about to come to an abrupt end. Far above Earth's atmosphere, a fleet of Zarathian ships emerged from hyperspace, their sensors locking onto the signal emanating from Lyra's damaged communicator. Among them was Lord Kale, a ruthless nobleman eager to seize control of the Empire and eliminate any threats to his ambitions. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Lyra and Alex remained unaware of the danger rapidly approaching. For now they enjoyed the fleeting calm, unaware that their lives and destinies were about to collide in ways neither could have imagined. The days that followed were a blur of activity for Lyra and Alex. With the ship's communication device partially restored, they focused their efforts on gathering supplies to repair the damaged power core. It was a delicate process, requiring both precision and patience. While Alex scoured nearby towns for spare parts, Lyra spent her time studying Earth's history and culture, using the data archives she had salvaged from her ship. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lyra sat cross-legged on the ground beside the wreckage, her holographic interface projecting images into the air. She scrolled through centuries of human warfare, battles fought with swords, guns, tanks, and even nuclear weapons. Each conflict told a story of struggle, sacrifice, and survival. Though violent in nature, these accounts revealed a deeper truth about humanity, its resilience in the face of adversity. Alex returned just as the projection shifted to footage of World War II, showing soldiers storming beaches under heavy fire. He paused, watching silently as Lyra leaned forward, her expression intense. "Is this what you've been doing all day?" he asked, dropping a toolbox onto the ground. Lyra nodded without looking up. "Your species has endured countless wars," she said thoughtfully. "Yet each generation finds new ways to adapt and overcome. It is remarkable." Alex crouched beside her, glancing at the hologram. "Yeah, well, we're good at making mistakes and learning from them. Doesn't mean it's something to be proud of, though." "No," Lyra agreed softly, "but there is wisdom in understanding why battles are fought and how they are won." Her words lingered in the air as Alex unpacked the tools. He couldn't help but notice how deeply absorbed she was in her studies. There was a hunger in her eyes, a desire to learn that went beyond mere curiosity. Whatever Lyra hoped to achieve, Alex knew it wasn't just about fixing her ship and leaving. Something bigger was brewing beneath the surface. Over the next few days, Lyra began sharing her findings with Alex, explaining the strategies she had uncovered. She spoke of ancient battles like Thermopylae, where a small force held off an overwhelming enemy through sheer determination and clever positioning. She described Gettysburg, where decisive leadership turned the tide of the American Civil War. And she marveled at modern tactics, like guerrilla warfare and cyber operations, which relied on stealth and innovation rather than brute force. Alex listened intently, occasionally chiming in with anecdotes or clarifications. To his surprise, Lyra seemed particularly fascinated by the concept of teamwork, the idea that individuals could unite toward a common goal, transcending personal differences for the greater good. "It is strange," she admitted one night as they sat around a campfire. "On Zarathia, loyalty is demanded, not earned. Here it seems people choose to stand together, not because they must, but because they believe in something larger than themselves." Alex stirred the flames with a stick, his gaze thoughtful. "That's what makes us strong, I guess. When you fight for someone else, not just yourself, it changes everything." Lyra nodded slowly, her mind racing with possibilities. What if the same principles could be applied to her own world? Could the rigid hierarchy of the Zorathian Empire be challenged, or even transformed, by embracing cooperation over control? As their discussions deepened, so did their bond. Alex found himself opening up to Lyra in ways he never had with anyone else. He told her about his late father, a man who had taught him the value of hard work and integrity. He shared stories of growing up in a small town, dreaming of adventure beyond its borders. In turn, Lyra confided in him about her life as a princess, revealing glimpses of the pressures and expectations placed upon her. "You ever think about running away?" Alex asked one afternoon as they worked on the ship. "Just leaving all that behind?" Lyra paused, her hands hovering over a panel. "I have considered it," she admitted. "But running solves nothing. Change requires action, not escape." Alex smiled faintly. Spoken like a true leader. Before Lyra could respond, a distant rumble interrupted their conversation. They both froze, listening as the sound grew louder, a low mechanical hum that seemed to reverberate through the ground. Moments later, a sleek black drone appeared on the horizon, its cameras swiveling as it scanned the area. "What the hell is that?" Alex muttered, instinctively stepping in front of Lyra. The drone hovered closer, its lights flashing ominously. Then, without warning, it emitted a high-pitched whine and fired a beam of energy directly at them. Alex grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her behind the wreckage just in time to avoid the blast. "They've found me," Lyra whispered, her voice tight with urgency. "Kale must have traced my signal." "Who's Kale?" Alex demanded, peering cautiously around the edge of the ship. "A rival noble," Lyra explained quickly. He seeks to undermine my father's rule and eliminate any threats to his ambitions. Another drone appeared, followed by a third. They circled the crash site, their movements methodical and precise. Lyra clenched her fists, her mind racing. She had no weapons, no way to defend herself against such advanced technology. But she refused to surrender, not yet. We need to disable them, she said firmly. If we can disrupt their systems, we might buy ourselves some time. And how exactly do we do that? Alex asked, eyeing the drones warily. Lyra glanced at the tools scattered around them. An idea began to form in her mind. Give me your EMP generator, she instructed. Alex blinked in confusion. My what? The device you used to fix my communicator yesterday. Quickly. Realization dawned on Alex, and he scrambled to retrieve the small handheld gadget. Lyra took it from him, modifying it with swift, practiced motions. Within seconds, she had rigged it to emit a powerful electromagnetic pulse. Stay close, she warned, gripping the device tightly. Then, with a deep breath, she activated it. A blinding flash of light erupted from the generator, sending waves of energy rippling through the air. The drones faltered, their systems overloaded by the sudden surge. One by one, they plummeted to the ground, lifeless husks of metal and circuitry. For a moment, there was silence. Alex stared at Lyra in awe, his heart pounding. Okay, he said finally. That was impressive. Lyra didn't respond. Her attention was focused on the sky, where several larger ships were descending rapidly. Reinforcements had arrived. We need to move, she said urgently, grabbing a backpack filled with essential supplies. Now. Without waiting for a response, she sprinted toward Alex's truck, motioning for him to follow. He hesitated only briefly before jumping into action, sliding behind the wheel as Lyra climbed into the passenger seat. Where are we going? He asked, slamming the gearshift into drive. Anywhere but here, Lyra replied, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. We cannot let them capture me. Not until I've completed my mission. Alex nodded grimly, flooring the accelerator as the first shots rang out behind them. The chase was on. They drove through the night, weaving along narrow dirt roads and avoiding main highways. Every so often, Lyra would glance back at the pursuing ships, her jaw set in determination. She knew they couldn't outrun them forever, but she also knew they couldn't give up. As dawn approached, they reached a secluded cabin nestled deep in the mountains. It belonged to an old friend of Alex's, someone who owed him a favor. For now, it would serve as a temporary refuge. Inside, Lyra immediately set to work fortifying their position. She used the remaining tools and materials to create makeshift defenses, while Alex contacted Rachel Monroe, the military captain they had observed days earlier. Though reluctant to involve outsiders, Lyra recognized the necessity of seeking help. Rachel listened intently as Alex explained the situation, her tone skeptical but intrigued. You're telling me an alien princess crash-landed in Montana and is being hunted by her own people? She asked dryly. It sounds crazy, I know, Alex admitted. But it's the truth, and if we don't stop them, they'll come after us next. After a long pause, Rachel sighed. All right. Meet me at coordinates 3745, 11289. Bring your friend. We'll figure this out together. As Alex relayed the message to Lyra, a flicker of hope ignited within her. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she felt a sense of purpose, a belief that change was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. But the battle ahead would test them all in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The journey to the coordinates Rachel had provided was tense and exhausting. Lyra sat silently in the passenger seat, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. She had spent her entire life preparing for leadership within the rigid structure of the Zorathian Empire, yet nothing could have prepared her for this moment. The stakes were higher than ever before, not just for her own survival, but for the future of Earth and possibly her home planet as well. Alex glanced at her occasionally, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. He could sense the weight of her thoughts, though he didn't press her to speak. Instead, he focused on navigating the winding mountain roads, keeping an eye out for any signs of pursuit. The drones they had disabled earlier were likely only the beginning. Reinforcements would come, and when they did, Alex knew they wouldn't be easy to evade. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they finally arrived at the designated location. It was a remote clearing, surrounded by dense pine trees, their branches swaying gently in the morning breeze. A single military jeep stood parked nearby, its engine idling. Standing beside it was Captain Rachel Monroe, dressed in full combat gear, her arms crossed firmly over her chest. Rachel stepped forward as Alex brought the truck to a stop. Her sharp eyes scanned Lyra carefully, taking in every detail, from her shimmering metallic suit to the faint glow of determination in her piercing blue eyes. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. "So," Rachel began, her tone measured but curious, "you're the alien princess." Lyra nodded, stepping out of the truck with grace and composure. "I am Lyra of the Zorathian Empire," she said simply, "and I require your assistance." Rachel raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by the formal introduction. "Assistance? That's quite a bold request, considering you haven't exactly explained why we should trust you." "I understand your skepticism," Lyra replied calmly. "But time is limited. My people will not stop until they find me. And if they succeed, Earth will become their next target." Rachel exchanged a glance with Alex, who gave a subtle nod of encouragement. Despite her initial doubts, Rachel couldn't deny the sincerity in Lyra's voice, or the urgency of the situation. After a brief pause, she sighed and uncrossed her arms. "All right," she said reluctantly. "Let's hear your story. Start from the beginning." For the next hour, Lyra recounted everything. Her crash landing, her observations of Earth's military tactics, and the arrival of Lord Kael's forces. She spoke plainly, avoiding unnecessary embellishments, and left no detail unexplained. When she finished, Rachel leaned back against the hood of the Jeep, her expression thoughtful. "This is insane," she muttered under her breath. Then louder, she added, "But if even half of what you're saying is true, we've got a serious problem on our hands." Alex stepped forward, his voice steady. "We need to work together, Rachel. Lyra's seen how humans fight, and she knows things about her people that could give us an edge. If we don't act now, we're sitting ducks." Rachel hesitated, weighing the risks. Trusting an alien, even one as seemingly genuine as Lyra, was a gamble. But doing nothing was equally dangerous. Finally, she straightened up and nodded decisively. "Fine," she said. "We'll help you. But here's the deal. You follow my orders, no questions asked. And if this blows up in our faces, I'm holding you personally responsible." Lyra inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the terms. "Understood." Over the next few days, the trio worked tirelessly to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Rachel led them to a hidden bunker deep in the mountains, a secure location, stocked with weapons, supplies, and communication equipment. It was designed as a fallback point in case of emergencies, a perfect hideout for their current predicament. Inside the bunker, Lyra continued to study Earth's history, focusing now on modern warfare and technology. She pored over tactical manuals, analyzed satellite imagery, and reviewed footage of recent conflicts. Each piece of information added another layer to her understanding of human resilience and adaptability. What fascinated her most, however, was the emphasis on teamwork and strategy, qualities that seemed absent in Zorathian military doctrine. Meanwhile, Alex and Rachel coordinated efforts to fortify their position. They set up surveillance cameras around the perimeter, rigged traps to deter intruders, and tested their weapons to ensure they were ready for action. Though neither of them had faced an alien invasion before, their training and instincts guided them through the preparations. During quiet moments, Lyra found herself drawn into conversations with both Alex and Rachel. With Alex, she discussed philosophy and ethics, exploring the values that defined humanity. His insights often surprised her, challenging preconceived notions she had held since childhood. With Rachel, she talked strategy, learning firsthand about the complexities of leadership and decision-making under pressure. "You're different from what I expected," Rachel admitted one evening as they reviewed battle plans. "Most royals I've read about are more concerned with power than principles." Lyra smiled faintly, tracing a finger along the edge of the map spread out before them. "Power without purpose is meaningless," she said softly. "On Zorathia, we are taught to obey without question. Here I see a different path, one where strength is tempered by compassion." Rachel studied her for a moment, then nodded approvingly. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. Just don't let it get you killed." Despite their progress, tension lingered in the air. They all knew it was only a matter of time before Kale's forces tracked them down. Late one night, as Lyra stood guard outside the bunker, her fears were confirmed. A low hum echoed through, the forest growing louder with each passing second. Moments later, several ships descended from the sky, their sleek forms cutting through the darkness like shadows. Lyra immediately alerted Alex and Rachel, who sprang into action. Together, they activated the traps they had set earlier, using explosives and EMP devices to disable the first wave of attackers. The forest erupted in chaos as blasts of light and sound illuminated the night, forcing the invaders to retreat temporarily. Inside the bunker, Lyra took charge of communications, using her partially repaired device to monitor enemy movements. She relayed updates to Rachel, who coordinated counterattacks with precision and efficiency. Alex, meanwhile, manned the perimeter, ensuring no one slipped past their defenses unnoticed. For hours, the battle raged on. Though outnumbered and outgunned, the trio fought with unmatched determination. Lyra's knowledge of Zorathian tactics proved invaluable, allowing them to anticipate their enemies' moves and exploit weaknesses in their formations. Rachel's leadership kept morale high, while Alex's resourcefulness ensured they never ran out of ammunition or supplies. By dawn, the invaders had withdrawn, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Exhausted but victorious, the three regrouped inside the bunker, tending to minor injuries and assessing the damage. "We can't keep this up forever," Rachel said grimly, examining a crack in the bunker wall caused by a stray blast. "They'll come back stronger next time." Lyra nodded, her expression resolute. "Then we must strike first," she declared. "If we can infiltrate their flagship and disable their command center, we may stand a chance." Rachel frowned, considering the plan. "It's risky," she admitted, "but it might be our only shot." Alex looked between the two women, his face pale but determined. "Count me in," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes." Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Both of you." As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting golden light across the battered landscape, the trio began finalizing their strategy. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew they couldn't afford to lose. For Lyra, this wasn't just about surviving. It was about proving that change was possible, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. And so, with renewed resolve, they prepared for the most dangerous mission of their lives, a daring assault on the heart of the enemy fleet. Failure meant certain doom. Success, however, could alter the course of history, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. The plan was set. Lyra, Alex, and Rachel spent the next 2 days preparing for their infiltration mission, knowing it would be their most dangerous endeavor yet. The enemy fleet loomed like a storm on the horizon, its ships hovering menacingly in Earth's orbit. Time was running out, and every second counted. Lyra took charge of gathering intelligence, using her partially restored communicator to intercept transmissions from Kale's forces. She pieced together fragments of data, identifying patterns in their movements and uncovering vulnerabilities in their defenses. Her holographic interface flickered as she mapped out the layout of the flagship, pinpointing key locations such as the command center, engineering bay, and escape pods. "This is where we'll strike," Lyra said, pointing to a glowing section of the hologram. "The command center controls all communications and navigation. If we disable it, the fleet will lose cohesion." Rachel studied the projection carefully, her sharp eyes scanning for potential pitfalls. "Getting there won't be easy," she remarked. Their security systems are likely top-notch. We'll need to move fast and stay undetected. Alex chimed in, holding up a small device he had been tinkering with. I've modified some EMP grenades, he explained. They should knock out power in localized areas without causing permanent damage. It'll give us a window to slip through. Lyra nodded approvingly. Good work. But remember, stealth is our priority. If they realize we're aboard before we reach the command center, we're finished. The night of the mission arrived sooner than any of them expected. Under the cover of darkness, the trio made their way to an abandoned airfield, where Rachel had arranged for a stolen fighter jet to be waiting. The sleek aircraft gleamed under the moonlight, its engines humming softly as they approached. You sure you can fly this thing? Alex asked nervously, eyeing the cockpit. Rachel smirked, climbing into the pilot's seat. Trust me, I've flown worse. Just buckle up and try not to throw up. As the jet roared to life, Lyra sat quietly in the back seat, her mind focused on the task ahead. She knew the risks, they all did, but failure was not an option. Not when so much was at stake. The journey to orbit was tense but uneventful. Rachel expertly navigated the craft through Earth's atmosphere, dodging patrols and avoiding detection. When they finally reached the edge of the fleet, she activated the jet's cloaking device, rendering them invisible to enemy sensors. Now comes the hard part, Rachel muttered, guiding the jet toward the flagship's docking bay. Once inside, they disembarked quickly, sticking to the shadows as Lyra led the way. Her knowledge of Zarathian technology allowed her to bypass locked doors and deactivate security cameras with ease. They moved silently through the corridors, their footsteps muffled by the metallic flooring. Despite their caution, danger lurked around every corner. Twice, they narrowly avoided patrols of heavily armed guards. Each close call sent their hearts racing, but they pressed on, driven by determination. Finally, they reached the entrance to the command center. Lyra knelt beside the door, her fingers dancing across a control panel as she hacked into the system. Within moments, the heavy metal doors slid open, revealing a cavernous room filled with glowing consoles and holographic displays. This is it, Lyra whispered, stepping inside. Start disabling the systems. Rachel and Alex sprang into action, planting EMP charges at strategic points while Lyra worked to override the mainframe. The hum of machinery grew louder as the ship's systems began to falter, lights flickering erratically throughout the chamber. But their success was short-lived. An alarm blared suddenly, piercing the air with its shrill cry. Red warning lights flashed overhead as automated defenses sprang to life, sealing off exits and deploying combat. Drones! They know we're here! Rachel shouted, raising her weapon as the first drone entered the room. Chaos erupted as the trio fought back, relying on teamwork to hold their ground. Lyra used her agility to evade attacks, striking down drones with precise blows. Alex hurled EMP grenades, temporarily disabling groups of enemies and buying them precious seconds. Rachel provided covering fire, her aim steady and deadly. Through the chaos, Lyra remained focused on her objective. She typed furiously at the main console, sweat dripping from her brow as she worked to complete the override sequence. Almost done, she called out, her voice strained with effort. Just as the last line of code executed, the doors burst open, revealing Lord Kale himself. Tall and imposing, his armor gleamed menacingly in the dim light. His cold gaze swept over the room, settling on Lyra with undisguised hatred. Princess, he sneered, drawing a plasma blade from his side. You've caused enough trouble. This ends now. Lyra stood tall, meeting his glare with unwavering resolve. No, Kale, this is just the beginning. Without hesitation, Kale lunged at her, his blade slicing through the air with lethal precision. Lyra dodged instinctively, countering with a swift kick that sent him stumbling backward. Their fight was fierce and evenly matched, each blow reverberating through the chamber like thunder. Meanwhile, Alex and Rachel continued to fend off waves of reinforcements, their ammunition dwindling rapidly. We can't hold them forever, Alex yelled, desperation creeping into his voice. Keep them busy, Lyra shouted back, ducking beneath another swing of Kale's blade. I'm almost... Her words were cut short as Kale struck her across the chest, sending her crashing into a nearby console. Pain shot through her body, but she gritted her teeth and forced herself to stand. There was no time to recover. The fate of two worlds depended on her. Summoning every ounce of strength, Lyra launched herself at Kyle, catching him off guard with a flurry of strikes. With one final powerful blow, she disarmed him, sending his blade clattering to the floor. Breathing heavily, she stepped forward, her voice firm despite her injuries. "It's over, Kyle. Surrender." For a moment, Kyle hesitated, rage and disbelief warring in his eyes. Then, with a snarl, he lunged for his weapon. But before he could reach it, Alex tackled him to the ground, pinning him down with sheer force. "That's enough," Rachel barked, aiming her rifle at Kale's head. "Move, and I'll shoot." Kale froze, his expression twisted with fury but unable to deny defeat. The rest of his forces, leaderless and confused, began retreating as the flagship's systems collapsed around them. "We did it," Alex panted, collapsing onto the floor in exhaustion. Lyra leaned against a console, her body trembling from the exertion. Despite the pain and fatigue, a sense of triumph washed over her. They had succeeded, not just in disabling the flagship, but in proving that unity and courage could overcome even the greatest odds. As the trio regrouped, Rachel contacted Earth's military forces, informing them of the victory and requesting extraction. Within minutes, reinforcements arrived, securing the area and taking Kale into custody. Back on Earth, news of their triumph spread quickly. Lyra, Alex, and Rachel became symbols of hope, not just for humanity, but for anyone who believed in the power of cooperation and resilience. For Lyra, however, the battle was far from over. Returning to Zarathia meant facing new challenges, ones that would test everything she had learned. But for now, standing amidst friends and allies, she allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready. Change was possible, and she intended to lead the charge.